Venetian history from 1700, 4 years after Doge Francesco Morosini died, to 1797, about 100 years, is an interesting period. It is a period that starts with Venice at its greatest geographical extent of power. But it also shows the very pronounced weakness of the, and I say this with a great deal of derision, stable oligarchic method of governance. A few clues to the sort of rot in the Venetian Empire can be found actually at the Siege of Candia, where Morosini, as you may recall from last episode, was in charge. During this siege, where the Ottomans were trying to take Candia from the Venetians, Francesco Morosini, the Venetian government anyway, wrote to everyone saying, hey, could you help us out against the Ottomans? And some European powers answered, but not many. But more telling is that the Venetians wrote to the Safavid Persian Empire. Think of it as modern-day Iran, more or less, around the same place. On the other side of the Ottomans, whose only bond with Venice is the fact that both of them, at the moment, hate the Ottomans. And so Venice writes to the Safavids and says, hey, you want to really make the Ottomans look bad? Help us defend Candia. That'll mess with your enemies. And the Safavids thought about it and were like, seems like a lot of effort for not really us getting anything out of it. Thanks, but no. If Venice had been all that in a bag of chips during that particular war, they would not have needed to write what amounted to a desperate text to a power that they otherwise had no dealings with. Part of the reason that Venice is deeply in trouble from the year 1700 to 1797, its eventual dissolution, is that it never seemed to understand how expensive running an empire is at this stage. Venice had a huge budget, and about 40% of that huge budget was dedicated to defense. That is a rather large amount. Paying this rather large amount means squeezing their colonies in Greece or Dalmatia all the harder, which bred discontent, which bred rebellions, which meant you had to use your fleets and your men or mercenaries to put down the rebellions, which meant you lost money, and so on and so forth. From the Venetian very much profit and loss ledger books, from 1700, Venice is on a sharp downward tilt. However, Venice was not without options. Venice, during this time period of 1700 to 1797, largely tries to stay out of foreign entanglements. This is both very good and very bad. Very good, no one tries to invade the lagoon. Very bad, it means that other powers like Portugal, Spain, the UK, or the British, I guess, and a bunch of other powers discover, or let me rephrase, exploit the resources of the New World and start the transatlantic trade route. Venice is stuck in the Adriatic and has to go through the entire Mediterranean, which is now dominated by Spain, to get anywhere. They are being neutral and inflexible in a world of dynamic change. I will clarify that dynamic change means horrifying imperialism and widespread disregard for the rights of human life. So, on the one hand, some Venetian scholars say, this peace during a turbulent time is a masterwork of diplomacy, and wow, Venice, you got it going on, buddy. And then there's the more cynical play, which is that Venice did not want to change. Its oligarchs did not want to invest in infrastructure or pay their fair share, and so avoided international entanglements. A phrase that comes up a whole bunch in my mind is, Venice, what do you think about the current trends of today? We have no opinion one way or the other, and that's how we like it. It even goes to the point where when the New World acknowledges Venice, when a, we could say, plucky little startup, based on white supremacy, writes to Venice, a place called, well, then calling itself the United States or America, writes to the only other Republican currently active in the world, like, Dear Venice, as the only other republic in the world and a lot more experienced than us, do you have any pro tips for a young democracy player? Yours sincerely, America. To which the Venetians largely said, ha ha ha, get good, peasant. You're not our kind. It's worth noting that the idea of separation of powers and checks and balances owes as much to Venice in the hypothetical American governance system as it does to Rome. The decline of Venice in a changing world with an increasingly self-interested and blinded oligarchy has some terrible results. The Venetians refuse in some essential way to interact really with the modern world. The Serrata works too well. It works as a time capsule for an era that has passed. We're going to see exactly how that comes to pass in our last episode with the story of the last Doge.